888-922-6060. One of my personal favorites. Now I'd like to welcome to the show one of the all-time favorite Yankees, Goose Gossage. Goose, welcome to Talking Sports with the Bird. How you doing?
Hey, Bird. Thanks. Good to be with you.
Good to have you, my friend. Collapse of the Yankees. I want to start with that. Obviously, you know, you're a Yankees 70s, early 80s, and you saw what went on with, you know, them scoring 6 runs against Detroit, not having a lead in the series in 39 innings of baseball. Are you as shocked as everyone else seems to be?
No, I'm totally, I'm as shocked as I'm probably sure they're shocked, and I've never seen anything when it could go wrong, it went wrong. And I've never seen a whole lineup go into a slump as they did. It just, to me, with Jeter getting hurt, and there's, let me tell you, these guys are up there in age, and that's taken a toll on them. And I just didn't think that there was a great urgency in their demeanor in the dugout or anywhere else. It just didn't seem like nobody was. I didn't see anybody throw a helmet or break a bat or. It just didn't seem like there was any urgency.
Speaking of Hall of Famer Goose Gossage, I talked about pressure of the postseason and the pressure of playing in New York. You're a guy, 7 times you recorded the final out in a division clincher, a championship series, or a World Series game. Just talk about what it means, the mindset of a person going in. Forget about New York for a second, but just in a pressure situation, because when you look at the Yankee numbers, and we'll get into A-Rod and Swisher and Teixeira and Grant, the list, it's easy to list the guys that could hit, but we'll get into a list of all those later. But just talk about the mindset you had and your success in being so tough in pressure situations.
Well, I happened to play on the greatest team that I ever had the privilege of playing on, and that was the 78 World Series team, and they won back-to-back World Championships, 77 and 78. I was not there in 77, but it was basically the same team in 78, and it was the greatest team of clutch guys and knew how to play the game. They never, ever beat themselves. When you got beat, and that was the whole division back in those days. It was, the Eastern Division was the beast of the East, and it was supposed to be a great division this year. It really didn't materialize as that. Baltimore had a great team. Boston fell apart. Tampa Bay really didn't come through like they were supposed to. Toronto didn't come through. So, back in those 70s, let me tell you, those guys, every team knew how to play the game. They were teams of veteran guys, and it just didn't seem like, the Yankees won their division, but, man, I have just never seen a team of great players, or at least name players, fall apart like they did in the playoffs. And, gosh, I'm just shaking my head now, and I've been shaking it, throughout the playoffs and after it, and still am shaking it.
Goose, you talked about the players and the sense of urgency, and not many players have commented on the A-Rod deal with the 2 women. Now, you're a former player. I'm not going to be naive enough to think this doesn't go on at all times, but I'm going to tell you from a fan's point of view, a lot of fans think they care more about the game than a player does. You take me through A-Rod's mind. He's been humiliated by being benched and pinch hit for. He gets pinch hit in that Saturday game, and here's a guy that can go to any club and get any woman he wants after the game, and that's what he's thinking about as the game is going on, and he's being humiliated. You talk about a sense of urgency, and basically, for me, the final foot in the ass for him to get out of New York. Talk to me about that mindset with A-Rod, or is there any mindset with A-Rod?
Well, it was certainly poor timing, to put it mildly. Certainly crazy stuff goes on, but, like I said, it just goes back to what I said earlier, the urgency of, I saw him smiling a lot in the dugout and just kind of, nonchalanting everything. And, it just didn't seem like the enthusiasm as a team was there. You lose a guy like Jeter and and that the heart and the soul of that team, the core four, with Posada being gone, and it's a different ball club, and I think you have to be real careful when you've got basically an unlimited funds or the highest payroll in baseball. I think you have to really be careful because you get stuck holding the bag like they have with A-Rod, spending all that. They owe him $125 million, I believe, and you're going to pay for that $125 million in the first couple of years that he had, and he's getting up there in age, and then the steroid thing. I think that possibly that could have something to do with it. I don't know, but he wasn't acting like a real team guy, or it didn't seem like it just from the watching it in my living room on TV, and they panned him a lot of times, and it comes time where I don't care who you are, the game, it's a young man's game, and the game has a way of passing you by, and this may be he may be in that gray area and that in the twilight of his career, as they say, and that could be just what is going on right now. But I just didn't like the demeanor of the whole team, and Swisher was smiling and laughing, and I wanted to see somebody fire a bat down and smash it, or
you wanted to see Lou Piniella out there,
somebody's face once in a while. To wake it up, and that's what you need sometimes is a foot in your ass that you were talking about.
Speaking of waking it up, you're talking to Hall of Famer Goose Gossage of the Yankees. An owner you obviously spent a lot of money in your day as well, George Steinbrenner. What would he do right now? You're hearing a lot of people getting on the two brothers. Will there be an apology? Will there one? I didn't think the apology with George way back when was a great idea. But, George, I guarantee you the reaction of George Steinbrenner would not be what it is today if he was still alive.
Well, none of these guys ever saw George in his prime like we did. And I'm including Jeter in that. George was a tough owner. He was a tough guy even when Jeter was around, but not like he was tough when we were. When we lost in 81 to the Dodgers, and that still sticks in my craw, that we lost that World Series. We had them down 2-0 and then lost 4 straight to them.
Yep.
And, we were sick. We were, kind of Winfield kind of went in the tank on us, and he couldn't hit a lick with anybody, really in driving in the runs, that he was our cleanup guy, and he was the thunder in our lineup. But, and I'm not blaming it totally on him, but we didn't get much. We didn't get any off. That was a situation where he got a hit in the World Series and asked for the ball. That pissed everybody off, you know. But, George was that kind of guy where when he in 81, he apologized to the fans. And that is when I made my decision that I was going to leave New York when I became a free agent. I was going to play out the rest. I had 2 more years on my contract, and then I was going to leave New York no matter what offer they gave me. So, George was, I'll tell you what, I've said it before. We missed, you hated to see George coming, but now you miss seeing him coming.
Yep.
And you know what? On all fairness to the boys, Hank and Hal, let me tell you, those were some big shoes to fill.
Yep.
And nobody could act or nobody had the personality like George did. And he was not afraid to come down there in the middle of a ball game or whatever and air some guys out. I mean, he kept guys on their toes, and I think that's part of what's missing in that, in that clubhouse or whatever. Jeter's the captain. I think it's up to Jeter a lot of times to shake things up, and I don't know that they didn't do that, and maybe somebody did that, and maybe I'm not there and I'm not hands-on, but somebody needed to put a foot in everybody's ass and get them going, and George was that kind of guy where he never, the funny thing with Steinbrenner, with George, was the more you won, the crazier he got, and it was a weird thing, but that was just the demands that were put on you that aren't there today.
Okay, but Goose, you see it now as an older gentleman. You see it now that the Yankee team needs that, but you just said that he's a guy that held everybody accountable. When did you said the apology kind of crossed the line. And was it because you were younger? You're now seeing it now after that it's maybe what a lot of the guys needed. But younger, you reacted a different way, like, I'm getting out of here. This is the final straw.
Well, apologies are, man, we gave it our best shot. We just came up short. And guys, like I said, Winnie hurt us a lot in that win in just the 81 World Series with the clutch hitting. All we needed was a couple of knocks here and there, and we're we that may go to 7 games, or we pull that World Series out. When everybody goes in the tank, it just seems like even Cano looked flat. I mean, the whole team just looked flat, and I don't think there's an apology necessary. I don't think these guys surely didn't. These guys, there's a lot of character on that Yankee team. There's still some great guys on that ball club, but somebody needed to put a foot in somebody's hind end to get the whole ball club going in the right direction. And I don't know, I don't know that anybody's there to really tell. I'll tell you one thing that's really missing in the game across the board is no one is passing the torch to teach these kids how to act, these young kids. And, if the captain doesn't do it, and I'm not singling Jeter out, but if the leaders on any ball club doesn't get on these young guys by the way they act, I see certain things on the Yankees, guys not wearing hats, guys pulling stuff that would have never been pulled when George was around. You acted like a Yankee. We did things like the Yankees. We set the tone for the way that, and a classy organization and a classy bunch of guys and professionalism. And I don't think I think that is something that's slipping through the cracks with the Yankees and with a lot of ball clubs across the board. That no one's passing the torch. And if I pulled some of the stuff, I see guys pulling somersaults. This Chapman for Cincinnati does a somersault off the mound. It's like what a bush league. It's turning into a bunch of bush league stuff that never would have happened back in the day because those veterans would not let it happen.
So, Goose, let me ask you, if you're looking at Robinson Cano, we're speaking with Hall of Famer Goose Gossage, you're looking at Robinson Cano, and here's the thing. He's been jogging to first base all year. Nobody seems to mind, and obviously, when you're batting .320 and you're going 40 and 100, nobody's going to care. When you go 1 for 34, that's when people start looking and say, man, this guy doesn't hustle. He hasn't hustled all year. Where does that blame fall? With Jeter, the captain, or with Girardi, the manager? Who needs to tell him something?
I'll tell you both. It's Jeter's job and it's the manager's job. But you know what? I'll tell you, it's getting further and further away. It's like the inmates are running the asylum now because of one thing, money. And they're afraid to tell these guys. And you know what? I think they're doing these young kids a disservice because when I was a young kid and you got out of line, let me tell you something. You didn't go back in that dugout. You might as well go out of the center field gate because there were going to be about 10 guys waiting for you to come in that dugout. That's why you never pulled the crap that they'd pulled. If you don't run out of ground ball, I didn't see it. I don't get the Yes Network out here in Colorado. I don't get to see a lot of the games. I'm with them in spring training. But I'll tell you what, money is dictating the way these managers and the front office are treating these guys. And I don't see anybody getting on anybody because they're afraid they've got so much money tied up in these guys. They figured, well, if I get on him, he's going to go in the tank on me. And I think they're doing them a disservice. It's tough love is what it's called. And that's something that's not happening anymore. And if you don't run out of ground ball, there was 10 guys there waiting for to tell you to get your ass, don't you ever do that again, or I'm going to put your ass on the bench. And that's the way it used to be, but it just seems to be changing in the demeanor of managers, and everybody wants to be their best friend, so they keep them around. If these guys don't like a coach, all they got to do is go to Cashman or the front office and tell them that they don't like them, and these guys are gone.
Right, because they have the leverage.
They're kissing their ass.
Yep, they have the leverage. Listen to Hall of Famer Goose Gossage. Let's go back to your career, Goose. You played 22 years, retiring in '94. voted to the Hall of Fame a lot longer than a lot of people thought. I know a friend of both of ours, Lenny Milio, I remember we were talking about he was doing some petitions and stuff like that. You finally got in. There's a lot of fans in your corner. You get in 2008. What did that nomination to the Hall of Fame mean to you?
Well, it just was a culmination of all I wanted to do was put a big league uniform on one time, and that one time turned into 22 years and then an election into the Hall of Fame. And I think I got a lot of support from a lot of great writers. I just wasn't getting enough support. And, these guys in the one-inning role were so dominant, I think that the writers really forgot what we used to do. That's why I'm not coaching. I don't believe in the 100 pitch counts. I believe that you've got a secretariat. You've got a great kid that's a secretariat kind of a great racehorse. And if you train that racehorse to run half a block, that's all that racehorse is ever going to be able to run. And pitching is very much like, pitching is very much like a great racehorse. You got to train these guys to go 125, 150 pitches, 175 pitches. Sometimes we walk out there and we throw 100 pitches, and it feels like we've thrown 200 pitches. Yep. Sometimes we walk out there and throw 20 pitches, then that's what I say. Sometimes we walk out there and throw 20, it feels like we've thrown 200. Sometimes we throw 200 and it feels like we've thrown 20. But that's what we used to do. I used to gear myself up for 3 innings.
Well, let me read that number out. When you were inducted into the Hall of Fame, your quote, you had 53 saves with 7+ outs. Mariano, in his career, has 1 save with 7+ outs. Trevor Hoffman had 2. Your quote was, I think that says it in a nutshell. I'm going to read you one more about Mariano. And I know you never mean to discredit Mariano, but your quote, don't tell me Mariano's the best relief pitcher of all time until he can do the same job I did. He may be the best modern closer, but you have to compare apples to apples. Do what we did. My question to you is, we know that's true. I'm curious to see when you talk to Mariano, you say you're down there in spring training. There's no doubt what you're saying is true. It is not apples to apples. What's Mariano's feel about that when you talk about that, the change in the eras, or have you talked to him about it?
Mariano's caught in the middle of this. Mariano is doing what they ask him to do. And, that is not a knock. Don't get me wrong.
No, I know.
Bird, Mariano is one of the finest human beings you will ever meet and one of the greatest relief pitchers ever. And he just came about it at a time that the role of the relief pitcher had changed. And when a guy goes into the 8th inning, it's like headlines. And, that was the norm. Starting pitchers used to be like Sabathia. When Sabathia is a throwback to, and Verlander. You take these kinds of guys.
And like Holiday,
Kane,
exactly.
All those guys with San Francisco, they've trained these kids to go 9 innings. And we'll come and get you when you're tired. Don't worry about it. But you've got to build up to those pitch counts. You're not just going to walk out there and throw 100 or 125 or 150 pitches. It's a process of training. But again, money has dictated it. But getting back to Mariano, let me tell you, Mariano just got caught in the middle. All I ever tried to do, when the vote came around, people would ask me, hey, Goose, how come you're not getting in the Hall of Fame? And these were great writers. These were senior veteran writers that had been around the game for a long time. They said, how come you're not getting in the game? I said, into the Hall of Fame. I said, listen, the game has changed so much and the role of the relief pitcher has changed so much that they forgot Mariano and these guys pitch in 1 inning. Trevor Hoffman. These guys are so dominant in that 1 inning role that they really forgot what we used to do. Yeah. I used to come into bases loaded. I used to come into situations where you couldn't even allow the ball to be put in play. And you had to get strikeouts. That's where I shined. I could throw the ball by guys, and I had great control. I didn't just throw it by them. I threw in locations.
Yep.
There was a method to my madness. I was a mean son of a bitch on the mound, and I scared myself out there.
Take me back.
I would look at hitters and I would say, I would look at a hitter and I would go, man, I would not want to be this guy up there right now.
You were the right-handed version. I remember because I was a right-handed player, playing pick-up ball. I was one guy I would not want to get up against was you, and if I was left-handed, I would never want to get up against Randy Johnson. Obviously, John Kruk proved that. Go back to me on October 2nd, 1978, my first trip to Fenway. I was a 19-year-old kid. And you had the game where you saved the Bucky Dent home run. There's a perfect example. You came in with one out in the seventh inning and basically won that game with Yaz's pop out. I can still remember the ball falling in Nettles' glove, as do a lot of Yankee fans. Was that the most pressure-packed game you were in? I know you've been in a lot of games. You've clinched a lot of games. But which one gave you the most satisfaction?
Well, that was by far the biggest game. When you come down, play a whole season, 162 games, and then you come down tied, and then you've got the Red Sox Yankees on top of that. Now you're playing a ball game of that magnitude in in Fenway Park. Let me tell you, it doesn't get any more pressure packed than that.
Yep.
But it was what we did, and that's what I did when a starter got in trouble in the seventh inning or the sixth inning, and we used to come into many games just to hold the game in check. We might be a run down or two runs down, and excuse me, my phone was ringing.
No problem.
But we might come into a ball game one or two runs down with the bases loaded, and they would bring us into ball games. And I'm talking about Raleigh Fingers. I'm not just talking about me, but the old relief pitchers. I challenge them to do what we used to do.
Yep.
And when I hear Mariano, and don't get me wrong, I love Mariano Rivera, but when they say he is the greatest relief pitcher of all time, come on.
You got to compare. You got to compare. You're right. You got to compare
to anybody because it's a totally different job.
Goose, I'm up against a heartbreak. Can you hang on for a second? I got about 10 more minutes, which I got to go over some of the Cliff Johnson, Reggie Jackson, Thurman Munson stuff. Could you hold on for a short break? Thanks a lot. Goose Gossage, Hall of Fame. We're going to get back with him in a second. And welcome back to hour number 2 of Talking Sports with the Bird, where I know people are out there listening to Hall of Famer Goose Gossage of the Yankees and other teams as well, but obviously made his name with the Yanks and also San Diego. Goose, welcome back. Really appreciate you hanging on there.
Yeah, Bird.
I know I owe Andrew Levy a big debt of gratitude. I will definitely make that up to him, I promise you. Couple more things before we let you go, and really appreciate all the time. Relationships with some of the players on a team. I know we talked a little bit about Reggie before. We'll get into him later, but it's amazing to me how many people I run into, ex-players of yours that really didn't like Reggie then and still don't like Reggie now. Talk about Reggie, your relationship with Reggie as a player and as it is now.
Oh, God, Bird. Reggie's Reggie. Reggie's Reggie. I don't know how else to tell it. Reggie can be I don't personally like the way he treats people, and I've told him that, and I don't really like hanging out with him because he will big league you in a second. Not me, but other people, and I've always been taught to treat people like you like to be treated, and not much can go wrong from there. And Reggie was Reggie. Reggie was one of the first guys of the current generations that really, the self-promoting type of athlete.
Right.
Reggie was kind of like that. He was like the first one to come along and really invented it. And, he was the straw that stirred the drink, and that didn't set well with a lot of guys on the team. And that was 77. I was not there, but I know what I knew what the problems were, and the guys didn't like him. And, I think that that's pretty much true today. And, I got along fine with Reggie, but I've told him on a number of occasions, Reggie, why do you treat people like you treat them? And so there's the problem with Reggie. But
that kind of leads me.
he was a good player, but he wasn't I didn't think he was the best player on our team.
Who did you think was?
A great nucleus of a team,
Right.
not one guy.
That kind of leads you to my next question, and I'm 52 years old, and obviously anybody my age, Munson was their guy, and you brought up the straw that stirs the drink story, and by the way you're describing Reggie, it's easy to see how him and Munson really never saw eye to eye. Talk about their relationship, the little you can, and really more importantly, your relationship with Thurman Munson.
Well, we became, he would stay at my house. He was commuting back and forth on his plane. Saturday day games or a Saturday night game with a Sunday day game. He would he sold his house in New Jersey and would stay at our house and then fly back after the day game after Sunday because sometimes we'd have a day off on Monday. We just became. He would be in the Hall of Fame today. There's no doubt in my mind. I look at God bless him, the late Gary Carter,
right.
Who was a great guy and a great person, and we miss him dearly. Was a great catcher. He had a great career. Carlton Fisk is in the Hall of Fame, and let me tell you, Thurman, I thought was better than both of these guys, in my opinion. And he would be in the Hall of Fame. He was one of our leaders on the team, and these guys didn't lead by a lot of talk. They led by example. They set the tone of how the game was played, running out ground balls. Robinson Cano, I love that guy, and he's one of my favorite players. And, all you have to do is mention to a kid like that, hey, you're going to run out every ground ball. And all he has to be done, if in fact that there were times that he didn't run out ground balls, there is absolutely no excuse for that. And that was some of the things that was not tolerated back in the day when I broke in the era that I played the game. And I'm not looking back and saying, oh, man, it was the greatest era. I'm glad I got to play in some of the old school, the way the game was taught, the way the game, coaches weren't afraid to get in somebody's face. Yep. And I think that's one thing that's really missing in this game today. Our coaches, of course you want a job. And the way to keep that job is to be friends with A-Rod and I'm not singling out Kevin Long. Kevin Long's a good friend of mine.
Right.
I love Kevin Long, and I think he's a great hitting constructor. But there are times when coaches, it's tough love is what I said before. And I think that that's something, and I'm not pointing to the Yankees, and I'm not saying that it happens there, but it happens across the board in the major leagues today, that everybody tiptoes around these guys because they're making so much money. And back in the day, let me tell you, nobody was afraid to get in Reggie's ass, or Billy wasn't, George wasn't, Thurman wasn't. We got in each other's asses if it needed to be.
Hall of Famer Gossage of the Yankees, you brought up the last guy I wanted to talk about, your relationship with manager Billy Martin, a guy that probably wouldn't take Robinson Cano jogging the first base at all. What was your relationship with Billy Martin?
Well, I didn't get along. That's a bad question, Bert.
I know you didn't get along.
Stand Billy Martin. But, we had some run-ins, and he pulled some shit on me that, should have never been pulled. And why he did it, I don't know. I think our relationship was strained when I came over there as a free agent. Yep. Mind you, back in the day, when I came in, when I was signed by Mr. Steinbrenner as a free agent, I was coming in. Sparky Lyle had won the Cy Young Award. And let me tell you, Sparky was one of the most popular and one of my best friends today. I love the guy. Yep. And, he made my transition so easy because he said, Goose, are they going to take an 82 mile an hour slider or a 98 mile an hour fastball? He said, that's silly. He said, but that put a lot of strain and pressure on me coming in, and it put a lot of strain and stress on Billy. I don't think he really wanted me. Didn't feel like he needed me with Sparky being the closer. And Sparky always thought that there wasn't enough room for two closers. I think there is, as long as one guy and the guys that are the 1-2 guys aren't selfish in terms of wanting to get a save. If you follow me,
I hear you. That was a big deal when you came. Sparky was the guy.
So I thought that I came in with the thought of us being the best left-handed, right-handed combination ever, and it didn't work out that way. They gave me his job on a silver platter, and I proceeded to stink the joint up for a couple months and dug us that deep hole. That 14-game deficit, that was because of my horseshit start.
But you made up for it, though.
Well,
you made up for it.
We dug ourselves out of that hole, but
yep.
It was because of being on such a great team.
Yep.
And a bunch of guys that, man, let me tell you, those guys knew how to play the game. They never, and I say never, beat themselves with base running errors, or we would make an error once in a while, sure, but man, that was the most sound fundamental team that I have ever seen or ever played on. Not ever seen, because there were some great teams. Those Oakland teams were great teams, so great Cincinnati Reds, wow.
Yep.
But those were teams that never, Philadelphia Phillies, back in the day when I was playing, Kansas City Royals, the Detroit Tigers at that time had great teams.
Yep.
Every team in the East was a powerhouse.
Couple more, Goose. You talked about, Roger Clemens was proven innocent over the summer. We all know it's probably not true. And you were very critical about it. I'm going to go back to Reggie. Reggie made some comments about A-Rod, made some stupid comments about Gary Carter, but made comments about A-Rod that now you have to look at these numbers. You've been very critical of Roger Clemens. This year, with Bonds up for nomination, Sammy Sosa, Roger Clemens, Mike Piazza, is that the consensus of most of you guys? Are any of these guys going to get in? Because this is the year I look at. If Bonds and Clemens don't get in, nobody's getting in. What's the consensus of you as a member of the Hall of Fame?
I don't think they should get in. They cheated. We're going to reward these guys for cheating. I know Clemens was found innocent. So was O.J.
Okay. Point made.
And it wasn't murder. I'm not comparing murder to using performance-enhancing drugs. They're worlds apart. They're at opposite ends of the spectrum. But, just because he was found innocent and they made a ridiculous specimen out of
McNamee, yep.
They shot holes in his testimony and his character. As I understand it, that was their witness that they hung the whole trial on.
Yep.
Was McNamee, and I guess that he wasn't the character witness. That didn't turn out to be such a good character witness.
Right. So you Goose, are basically saying none of them. Because I want to read a quote. We have had a former guest on our show, Mike Schmidt, a contemporary of yours, and we asked him if they were there when you were playing, would you use them? He said yes. And I don't want to misquote you, but you said they were not present when you played, but had they been, you probably would have used them. I know that people listening out there say, man, that's kind of like a mixed message. But talk about the pressure that these players are under if you don't use them. If they know everybody else is using them and it's not a level playing field, the temptation to make that money and stay in the big leagues, how tough is that for a player to look the other way?
Absolutely. And the reason why I say if Andy Pettitte could have used them, because Andy Pettitte, to me, is one of the classiest character guys that I have ever met in my life. And if he says that he used them, and if I was in an injury situation and somebody told me that HGH or something like that would expedite or speed up my injury, hey, I would be so pressured, and I don't think there's any question that I possibly could have done it. Absolutely. But we've got to get rid of these performance-enhancing drugs because it is not a level playing field, and I'll tell you where the real dangers lie, are our kids.
Yep.
In high school, I know that it's becoming a problem. I've heard in high school sports, in football, because if you got two athletes of the same same athletic ability,
Yep.
and one's on and one isn't, you got two different animals.
Exactly.
I saw bat speeds. I played with Mark McGuire. Mark McGuire is a good friend of mine. I love Mark McGuire. He probably doesn't like me anymore because I said, no, he doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame. I don't know how he feels about that.
Yep.
But if these guys cheated and they're known cheaters, or you think that there's a great chance that they are, 99% chance that they, like Clemens, you can't tell me Clemens didn't use performance-enhancing drugs.
I would agree. I would agree.
And are we going to reward these guys by letting them in the Hall of Fame? Are you kidding me?
So I guess your intentions are clear. My last question, you listen to Hall of Famer Gossage, and again, I want to thank you for all the time, Goose. My last question, Pete Rose's last career at bat, you struck him out. He's not in the Hall of Fame. Two-part question. What's the consensus on you guys with Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame, and who has done more damage to the integrity of baseball? What Pete Rose did and the ballooning of all these numbers due to steroids?
Well, we'll just take Pete first. The first thing that I learned, and we learn as professional baseball players, and there's a big sign the size of a door in every clubhouse, gambling. Do not gamble on the game or you will be suspended for life. And if you really think about it, there's nothing that will, personal problems, guys go out and they could go out and kill somebody. It's not going to bring the game down. The one thing and only thing that will bring down the game, what would the game mean if there was a question of the integrity of the game,
You're right.
of being manipulated by gambling? What would it mean? It would be WWF wrestling.
It'd be like highlight or horse racing. I get you.
It would. I don't know highlight or anything else, but it would be like WWF. It would be like wrestling on Friday night.
I get you.
And Pete Rose broke the cardinal rule of baseball. Do not gamble on the game. And I think Pete had it. We all know that Pete has had somewhat of a gambling problem. I think that I always said, I think there's more to the story than we will ever know. And finally he came out and said, yeah, I gambled on the game. I think there's still more to the story than we will ever know, but he broke the cardinal rule, and absolutely not does he belong in the Hall of Fame. Because if we let him into the Hall of Fame, and that's the last thing that's the last paddle for somebody's ass, and then steroids no different. If we let these guys in, we might as well let everything go.
Yeah. Gossage, first of all, I really want to thank you for all the time. Honest, opinionated, raw. That's exactly what we look for on Talking Sports. Really appreciate your time. We'll talk down the line. Thanks so much.
You bet, Bird.